Welcome, Miriam and Craig, to our panel. And first of all, let's introduce yourselves. What is your role at Nextdoor, and what are you most excited about your role at the company?
I'm Miriam Banakaram. I'm the head of marketing, which at Nextdoor also includes being the head of community and global.
I'm Craig Lazowski. I'm head of data, information systems, and trust. And that means I lead our trust and safety functions, AI, as well as our centralized moderation and information security.
Great. And what are you most excited about your role at Nextdoor?
I'm most excited about the work my teams have on the impact of the experience that people have when they're on Nextdoor.
And Miriam?
For me, the reason I joined Nextdoor is because I inherently believe in the purpose of the company to cultivate a kinder world where everybody has a neighborhood to rely on. And I think Nextdoor has a unique place in that it is about leveraging technology to enable humanity, right? Our goal is not to actually have to come to Nextdoor and just stay on Nextdoor. Our goal is to be an enabler to actually connect you in real life to those that are closest to you. And so that is what makes me excited and has me wake up every day.
Today's summit, we talk a lot about the concept of trust and safety. And I would love to have your views from marketing perspective or community perspective, Miriam, and from data security and safety perspective, Craig, when it comes to trust.
Well, I mean, trust is crucial and critical to Nextdoor, right? We focus on earning trust every day. We have neighbors all around the world. We're in more than 285,000 neighborhoods in 11 countries. And you turn to Nextdoor for trusted information. You're actually giving and getting help. You're getting things done, and you're building real world connections like you do in your neighborhood. So trust is key, right? It's what enables you to come onto the platform and hire a babysitter or a dog walker, or in fact, turn to a neighbor who you may not know and actually give and get help. So trust is really the cornerstone of Nextdoor. I don't know, Craig. I know you have things to add to that.
I mean, I think you did a wonderful summary of it, but trust is our #1 core value as a company. It's written on the walls. It's the first one, is to earn trust every day, just as Miriam had mentioned. It's my title. It's the reason why trust and safety is at the executive level within Nextdoor. Is people expect something different when they want to talk to their neighbors, and if they don't trust that it is their neighbors, then fundamentally the product experience isn't living up to its promise. So it's incredibly important, and it's the lens that we take to every decision that we make from a product, a marketing, and a brand perspective.
And I love it. And for the audience who are not familiar with Nextdoor, Nextdoor is an app for neighborhoods where you can get local tips and buy and sell items and more. So that's why it's very interesting to have both the marketing and community leader, as well as the data trust and safety leader in the same room. So how often do you two work together?
Pretty much daily. I mean,
yeah, I mean, every day. Are from the community side, which is a huge aspect to it. And we'll probably talk about this a little bit later in our conversation, but all platforms that have UGC, user-generated content on it, obviously have community programs. Our community program is quite vast. Not only is it about the creators on our platform and the connectors, the people that actually meet people on our platform, get them together in real life, but it's also a fundamental part of our safety system, of our moderation system, because we have a community-based moderation system, which in reality is a hybrid system, but they're active participants in the platform, and they help shape the conversations and tone on the platform. So the fact that Miriam is on the marketing and brand side, and I'm on the engineering, data, and trust side, is we work incredibly closely together, and I think it's a superpower.
Yeah, I love it. It's what we often see is that there is a gap and there's a divide between these two group leaders, and that's where brand and user safety falls short. So I'm glad that you mentioned you collaborate actually very frequently, like on everyday basis. So I want to touch upon the community policy and brand identity as you work closely together. So you cannot talk about trust and safety without talking about community policy. That's the code of conduct for Nextdoor. And we often also talk about the code of conduct needs to reflect the brand identity. Can you two talk about how you two collaborate on the community policy to reflect the brand identity together?
Our community policy, our community guidelines, as we refer to them, has a number of inputs. It has brand, it has trust and safety, it has our operations teams, it has outside policymakers. We have advisory boards where we bring in social scientists to help sort of guide a lot of our inputs, and then we put them into a decision-making framework. And so it's really a combination of our policy team, because we have a formal policy team that's within council, Miriam's team and my teams, and we put it through a decision-making framework and make sure that it lives up to the values. Number one, that it lives up to our internal corporate values or company values. Second, I would actually even say like brand is secondary. It must live up to our internal values, and then it aligns with brand, and then it has to be able to be consistently and fairly enforced.
I mean, the thing I would add is that we're a community platform. That is by definition what we are. I sort of like to compare it to a dinner party. You're invited to my house for dinner. You know, there are rules when you come to dinner. You can have a, hearty conversation. You can disagree, but the minute you dump, wine on somebody's head, you'll be asked to leave, right? There are just rules to the way the community works. And I think to what Craig described, we actually have a pretty robust system of inputs and then a framework to actually make those decisions so that we can, have a clear decision-making process when things show up that may not be what is acceptable on our platform. We're pretty mindful and we set out those guidelines. You actually have to, when you're signing up, you have to, acknowledge the community policy so that you're aware that that is how you're going to behave when you join. And then, Craig's team and my team work actively to make sure that that is in fact what your experience is, so that it's kind, welcoming, and obviously gives you a neighborhood to rely on.
Yeah, recently you released a transparency report. So really congratulations on that. So not only you acted on keeping the community safe, but you also want to communicate externally in a very transparent way. And tell us about the journey of constructing the transparency report, because more and more companies are doing that, but still it's a very small portion of all companies are actually doing that. So share with us about a journey and what is the impetus behind doing it, and what are the key highlights of your transparency report?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The impetus is really around trust. Without transparency, I don't understand how you can trust someone or some entity. And so we really feel it's important to be transparent around what is going on the platform. No one's perfect, by not even close. But regardless of what the data was going to show, we wanted to be transparent so people understood or can understand what's going on the platform. The results, though, are something that we're very proud of. And I think it does show, you asked, what I want to highlight, I think it shows the power of our unique approach to moderation. We don't have solely a centralized moderation. We have a community-based moderation system because we are a local platform. We're not a global platform. Our content doesn't travel around the world. The conversations on our platform are inherently local. And some of those conversations, you need to have really local context in order to moderate them. The conversation that's happening in some PTA group in some part of the country is fundamentally different than what's happening in another country, much less the other side of a country. And so I think the local context is really important. And I think the transparency report also highlights the power of it. For a company the size of Nextdoor, for us to be able to have, hundreds of thousands of active moderators on the platform with a resolution time, roughly 5 hours, is pretty incredible. Of course, we also talk about our hybrid moderation system. There are certain topics that we feel are very difficult or potentially harmful, and they need to be handled by trained professionals. So we have that as well. But I think what the transparency report really shows is the power of our unique approach. And it's not just about moderation, it's also really around product features that try and guide the conversations to be helpful and kind in the first place. So we highlight as well, the really fantastic results we've had with our product innovations, like the kindness reminder, which, interrupts you, right? Through like some of the work of my AI teams around, we can, at the time of posting, do we believe that this could potentially be interpreted as a hurtful comment or post? And we ask people to think twice. Is this the type of conversation you would want to have with your neighbors? And we've seen great results of people actually editing those before they get posted. So you prevent the moderation need in the first place.
So if I could just step back for 1 second, like, I think the impetus for us on the transparency report is that as a company, as an executive team, we want to be better, right? We want to model what we think our peers should be doing, and we want to be a leader in the space. And we believe that to be a leader in the space, trust is central, and that delivering on our purpose requires trust and transparency, right? I think we acknowledge that we're not always going to get it right, but the intent is there, and there's always a desire to listen and learn and improve. And I think that's what you really hear, and that's what you really see in our delivery of a transparency report, so that we can sort of set a standard and continue to iterate and learn and get better.
Yeah, there are really three things I heard from you too that I think the whole community and audience can learn from. One, Craig, you said that really one size doesn't fit all in content moderation. So the fact of your unique approach to take the local context into the moderation standards is really a reflection of how Nextdoor wants to keep your community safe. And I think we really encourage, all the leaders in the space to think that way. Is how you take content moderation bespoke to your brand identity or what you want to do as a brand value. And I think the second thing Greg you said is how you actually do that proactively. How you actually stop toxic behaviors by really setting the code of conduct in a very transparent way and incentivize the positive and healthy behaviors at the get-go. And I think that really prevents the community to have like a snowball of toxicity. And that's really very powerful way you're doing this, Craig, as you talked about it. And Miriam, I really love what you're saying is if you don't measure, you cannot improve. Right, the transparency report is a way for you to get all the leadership together, looking at this issue, really improve on the trust measures. I really love it, and the fact that you two work so closely together is exemplary company, for all companies to learn from. And Greg, I have a quick question. So when we read the transparency reports before we get on this call with you, I did notice you have a community volunteer program as part of the transparency report. Can you two expand on that with us?
Sure. That's what I was sort of mentioning, is our community-based moderation is the way we have hundreds of thousands of people in the 285,000 neighborhoods around the world, is members or neighbors on the platform decide that they want to help their community, right? These are community activists. And they are a part of our moderation system, and they go, and there's a voting system, of course. We have lots of controls in place so that like there's not too much centralization of power, and so they can't actually take content down, but they vote on content and based on scoring systems. It allows us to bring the local context and significant scale to our moderation system.
I think it's key, right? I think what you heard from Craig is a three-pronged strategy, really, right? There's the community team, which is made up of neighborhood leads and reviewers. There's Craig's team, the neighborhood operations team of professionals, right? Trained professionals who know how to support when needed. And then there's the interventions that we've built, from the kindness reminder to, things around anti-racism. So there's a robust system in place. And then also we do a lot to really motivate, nurture, and train leads on a voluntary basis, right? Including offering inclusive moderation, anti-bias training as necessary, right? I think there are brand advocates in essence, right? They are volunteers. And so we want to make sure to support them as they support their neighbors and neighborhoods, which they do as volunteers. And I think, again, to Craig's earlier point, it allows for local differences. It was a decision that was deliberate to allow for neighborhoods to be different. One of my favorite stories actually is with somebody on Craig's team. Bonnie was telling me that in one of the neighborhoods she's in, people swearing is considered not really the norm. And so somebody might vote on that. And I was laughing. I said, I live in New York City and we consider swearing a term of endearment. So, there are differences that are kind of humorous in neighborhoods. And so we have to allow for that, because if you started doing that in New York, people would be wondering what was happening. And the opposite is true sort of in Bonnie's neighborhood. So you do want to allow for that flexibility. And of course, that's true on a global perspective too, because what's okay in the Netherlands may not be here or in Australia, for example. So I think it is complex, and we're committed to just continually working on this and making it better and measuring so that we can actually see the difference that we're making.
Awesome. And we touched upon brand, policy, value, and want to touch upon an implementation or enforcement. So today we see in US, the US internet users, 40% of US internet users have reported to be subject to hate speech or racism. So from implementation perspective, how do you keep Nextdoor community users free from racism, discrimination, but also more and more bots trolling adversarial countries attacks?
It's a multi-pronged approach and solution. It first starts, like on the bot side, is you need to be confirmed in order to come onto Nextdoor. We are firm in our position, real people, real names. They belong to the neighborhoods. And so we go through a confirmation verification process for every account that's on our platform. And so that helps from a trolling perspective, or it helps from a bot's perspective, and then it's a real name and we enforce it. One of a very popular reporting reason is if someone's using a fake name. We don't want people with fake names. That's against trust. We use machine learning to obviously proactively identify those product interventions we talked about. That's using machine learning around trying to prevent the content from even being created, nudging people, saying, do you really want to use these words? We also use machine learning to detect it, because of course those interventions, some people don't want to edit, and some people don't even realize that they're using potentially hurtful language. They're just not maybe educated in it, maybe no ill intent. So we use machine learning to identify that content and flag it for review. We also have close to 70 million neighbors out there that can report content. If they see something that they think is offensive, they will report it, and it will go through our system. And depending upon what's being reported for, it either goes to the hundreds of thousands of community moderators, or if it's particularly sensitive, like racism would be, it would go to our centralized neighborhood operations team. So, through product interventions around detecting at the time of content being created, knowing who's on the platform, making sure that they're not, they're not bots, they're not foreign actors, user or neighbor reports around content or members, or our own proactive detection.
So my hope is the Craig and the Miriam of any company can collaborate as closely as you two do. So I'm very curious, in your journey of collaborating together, what are the lessons you've learned to really collaborate well between a marketing or community leader and an engineering / privacy / safety? Craig, you have a lot, both of you have a lot of hats. How we can ensure this both sides of the leadership can collaborate well? And also in the early days when you first collaborated, what didn't work out and how you figured it out so that you can work so closely and well together today?
I don't really remember that there was a particular incident where we weren't necessarily aligned. I think the process at Nextdoor is very much oriented around a decision-making framework that allows you to step away from sort of your personal feelings and actually be able to process information in a way that's quite neutral. So it allows you to build alignment and a clear and thoughtful process sort of along the journey. I would say, one of my big lessons is it really helps, first of all, to have a company that's purpose driven. That actually is a North Star that actually aligns the entire organization, not just for these issues, but all kinds of strategic issues. And I would say, and I'll be really curious to see what Craig has to add, right? Because we do get to collaborate and our teams are incredibly collaborative and work well together. And by the way, they don't always agree, right? And that's what a decision-making framework allows you to walk through: who has input, who owns the decision, who's the approver. But I think one of the big lessons I would give everybody is, make these decisions and set up these frameworks and processes not in the heat of the moment, because in the heat of the moment, it's really easy to be reactive and make knee-jerk decisions that then actually set a precedence that may not be what you're intending. So really prepare in advance, do a lot of, sort of testing and learning on your processes when you're not in the middle of a crisis. And then I would say, we're all here to enable humanity. We're all about tech for good. And so that alignment already is why somebody chooses to come to Nextdoor versus a different job. And so that is super helpful. But I'll be curious to see if Craig remembers a time where we didn't agree.
I think you did a wonderful job of summarizing it. It's really, I want to reinforce how key it is to have your process or framework, however you want to phrase it, instrumented before there is a contentious moment, because inevitably people will disagree. What I think is really important, and it's something I think we really benefit from, is it's around like we have a shared purpose, but it's about the teams approaching it. It's never been an issue here, but I could foresee it being an issue in other companies. It's not one group's challenge or problem to solve, it's shared. So it's never that the marketing team is like, trust and safety, there's this problem, you got to go fix this. And like, no, it's our problem. And that comes down from a singular purpose and singular alignment. Now, there needs to be a decision maker and there needs to be an approver, but understanding that it doesn't matter. People will disagree on the tactic on how to solve the problem, but not disagree on should we solve the challenge or problem. And I think having that inherent alignment allows us just to power through and then make those decisions. And sometimes people will disagree on the tactics and disagree and commit, but that's what the frameworks are for.
I love it. On a side note, I actually co-founded a nonprofit called Oasis Consortium to tackle the user safety standards. We have 5P framework, which are priority, partnership, people, product, and process. And you make me think I need to replace potentially priority by purpose. But they're very similar in a way where what I hear from you is when a company has a priority to be a purpose driven corporation, and then that cascade to the leadership and therefore to the whole company to act on a very similar or the same way of addressing problem. And that's a process and a framework. I really appreciate you sharing with us. And I think it hopefully will help our audience to collaborate together more often from the two sides of the business. And to wrap up today's session, I do want to invite you to leave one piece of advice to the audience of how to build trust in the community.
My one piece of advice is you only live once, so make a difference, right? We all come every day because we actually believe in the purpose of Nextdoor and we want to leave the world in a better place than we found it. And if you haven't taken that lesson from the past 2 years of living through a pandemic, I'm here to tell you, find something that gives you joy and find a way to make the world a better place, and do it not alone, but do it together. That's what partnership is, within your company, within your neighborhood, within the world at large.
I think you build trust through being consistent, high integrity, and transparency. People won't always agree with your decisions, but if they understand how you make a decision and if you're consistent of how you make those decisions, they will trust you.
Very wise words. Thank you so much, Craig and Miriam, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.